All right, today we're diving into Neo4j. It's a database that was built on this really simple but kind of radical idea. What if the connections between your data points were actually the most important thing? It turns out that one single focus on relationships, well, that became its superpower.
So let's just chew on that for a second. What if the relationships, the actual links between things, were treated like they mattered just as much as the things themselves? Or maybe even more? It seems simple, right? But that one idea, well, it kicked off a total revolution in the database world.
Okay, so to really get why this was such a game changer, we need to rewind a bit. We've got to look at a huge problem that developers were constantly running into. So picture this. It's the year 2000. A team of developers over in Sweden are working on this super complex content management system, and they just hit a wall, a massive one. See, their project absolutely needed to understand all these intricate connections between different pieces of content, and the tools they had, they just weren't up to the job, not even close.
And here's the core of the problem. Traditional databases, the ones with all the tables and rows, they're just terrible at handling highly connected data. Every single time these developers tried to follow a complex chain of relationships, the whole system would just slow down to a crawl. It was a complete nightmare. They knew they needed a totally fresh approach. And that fresh approach, it ended up being a total breakthrough in how we even think about structuring data.
Okay, so first up, they came up with the idea of nodes. The easiest way to think about these, they're the nouns in your data. They're the things, the individual entities, like a person, a product, a company. You get the idea.
All right, next, and this is the real secret sauce here, we have relationships. This was the game-changing idea. Instead of being some afterthought you have to calculate, relationships are treated as real, tangible things in the database. They're the verbs that connect our nouns. So a person works for a company or is friends with another person. The connection itself is the data.
And finally, to round it out, you've got properties. Think of these as the adjectives and adverbs that give everything color. So a person node might have properties like name and age, right? And even the works for relationship can have its own property, like a start date. This is how you add all that rich, descriptive detail to the whole picture. And voila! You put those three things together, nodes, relationships, and properties, and the property graph model was born. It's this beautiful, simple, yet incredibly powerful way to map out the world as it really is. Just a giant network of interconnected stuff. And this idea took off like a rocket. Remember they hit that wall in 2000? Well, by 2003, they already had the first version running in a real production environment. A few years later, in 2007, boom, Neo4j 1.0 is released. And this was huge because it was the world's first native graph database. That means it was built from the ground up just for this, not bolted onto something else. And from there, it just kept growing into the massive platform it is today.
So, okay, great. They've built this amazing new model, but how do you actually talk to it? How do you ask questions and get answers from all this connected data?
Well, this is where the difference becomes crystal clear. With a traditional database, you have to do these really expensive operations called joins. It's like smashing different tables together, hoping to find a link. It's slow. Neo4j, though, it does something called a graph traversal. And that's really just a fancy way of saying it plays connect the dots. It literally just follows the lines from one node to the next. It's way, way faster and more natural. And to make this traversal happen, the Neo4j team created their own query language called Cypher. The whole point was to make it feel super intuitive, almost like you're just drawing a picture of the data you want to find. And you can see what I mean right here. Just look at this pattern. You use parentheses, kind of like circles, for the nodes, and an arrow for the relationship. It literally looks like a little ASCII art drawing of what you're asking for. This says, hey, find me a pattern where some person is friends with some other friend. It's so visual, and that's what makes it so powerful. Now, this new way of thinking and asking questions wasn't just some academic exercise. Oh no, it started having a massive impact on some really tough, real-world problems.
So where does this stuff actually shine? Well, think about something like fraud detection. You can spot complex fraud rings by literally following the hidden connections between seemingly random accounts. Or what about recommendation engines? That whole people who bought this also bought thing? That's a graph problem. Social networks, obviously. Supply chains, cybersecurity. I mean, in any area where the connections are the real story, this approach is a total rock star.
And because it's so powerful, it's no surprise it's been picked up by some of the biggest names you can imagine. We're talking about NASA, e-commerce giants like eBay, massive banks like UBS, and even major world governments. These aren't small-time players. They're all using graph tech to tackle their absolute hardest, most tangled-up problems. But the story didn't stop there. Neo4j wasn't content with just being a database. It kept on evolving.
See, it didn't just stay a core database. It grew into a whole platform. They added powerful graph data science tools so you can run all sorts of crazy algorithms on your data. They introduced a tool called Bloom, which lets you visually explore the graph, no code required, just point and click. And they launched Aura, which is their managed cloud service that lets you spin up a graph database in literally minutes. It's the whole package.
So what you have now is this complete platform that empowers pretty much everyone. It's not just for the hardcore coders anymore. Now, data scientists, business analysts, you name it, they can all jump in and start using the power of graphs to find those hidden connections and insights that were basically invisible before. So, when you boil it all down, Neo4j started with one simple truth: relationships matter. And as our world gets more and more connected every single day, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What other incredible patterns, what other mind-blowing discoveries are just sitting there, waiting for someone to start following the connections?